Hi, I'm Gracie, and this is Scott from Small Worlds of Big Adventures, and today we have a very topical subject that we're going to discuss, and that is tariffs. Before we get into it, we're taking this from a very apolitical, not good or bad tariffs. Just going to talk about how the tariffs are impacting board games and what that might mean for especially small board game companies.
And the consumer.
And the consumer, for sure. So to kick it off, we're going to talk a little bit about... So to kick it off, we're going to explain what a tariff is. Scott?
In a nutshell, the U.S. specifically is levying a tax on imported goods. I'm not sure what it is currently. It's been changed a lot over the last few months. You'd have to kind of check. But it was at one point a line item of 10% on pretty much everything, and then varying tariffs on China. And that is, for board games, the majority of the board games, especially for smaller companies, are manufactured in China. The reason why is because China is basically the only country that has that manufacturing capability. One of the articles we will link below kind of discusses this a little bit from a developer's point of view, but things like cards, if you're just making a card game, you can probably get that made in the United States. That's not super hard to do. There are companies that do that for a cost that isn't terrible. But a lot of the games, especially that we do, have little fiddly plastic pieces. They have meeples, they have
coins, and
a lot of different stuff.
Tokens.
And the capacity and even the knowledge, they say a lot of times, just isn't here in the United States. It's just not something they do. Especially not for the production cost that some of these smaller companies would be asking for. An example that somebody gave was they asked the company how much would it take to make just the box that their game would come in, and it would cost $10. And $10 is basically the amount that the entire game would cost to manufacture in China, so they can't do that.
And we love a well-organized box.
A well-organized box. This tariff is paid by the importing company, and so that affects the developers and producers of board games specifically. It also affects other industries, but we're not here to talk about that. And in one fashion or another, these companies have to either eat the cost or they have to pass it on to the consumer.
So, as an example, if you order $100 worth of items, and then whatever the tariff percent is, let's say you have to pay $50 in tariffs, then now you have spent $150 bringing these items into the country.
Right. And we'll have some examples from some articles and some Reddit threads and stuff below that we'll have linked. One of the examples that they give, and we'll talk a little bit about later, talks exactly about that.
So, but to go from this is a tariff to like our experience, as you guys know, we kickstart a lot of our games. And we have gotten a lot of games, but we have some games that are in production, and we have some games that are literally waiting to get shipped to us.
I started a game called Dracula's Curse. Everything was going smooth. I forget the precise month, but I believe they were planning on shipping in,
I want to say April.
February or March, I think. Maybe the end of March. But then the tariffs hit, and they decided they were going to wait to see what happened, because at that point, everything was made. We'd already paid, technically, everything that we're supposed to pay, and if they had shipped, it would have increased their costs more than double, I believe, at that point.
That was like peak China tariffs.
That was when things were, I think, 245%. They waited up, as of recording this, a week and a half ago. The tariffs on China have been dropped down. I think right now they are at 25%. I'm not sure.
It changes.
It changes, but it was enough of a drop that they said it's supposed to drop for 90 days, and they said, please ship our product in this little window we have. So now it's supposed to be coming in basically it'll get here, and then it'll take a month or so to distribute and everything, but we're supposed to be getting a month. So that game specifically we saw essentially get held off for a couple, 2-3 months.
In the board game creators credit for that game. They've kept us informed.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason we know that the tariffs were the reason why there was a delay in shipping and all that.
And we've been informed by 2 of the other Kickstarters that we've got currently going that essentially they're sitting on a wait and see.
Yeah.
They're not. The next one that we'll have that will be shipping wasn't going to be until close to the end of summer anyways, so they said they're just going to have to see what it looks like at the end of summer. In the stuff that we'll link below, some of them are saying we're going to have to pass some of the cost on to our customers, otherwise we can't ship it, which has happened before. I've seen other Kickstarters that are like, all of a sudden from the time that we Kickstarted this to now, the cost, specifically through COVID, the cost of importing stuff had gone way up, and they had to basically ask for a second round of funding, otherwise you didn't get your game. The Dracula's Curse said we're not doing that, we're just going to wait and see and try and send it, so presumably we'll just be getting it. We'll see with some of the other Kickstarters. They said they're going to have to see what it is. Then none of ours are specifically saying, hey, we're increasing the price. But I've seen other people on Reddit and Discord and stuff saying, hey, I'm paying an extra $10 to get this shipped in, essentially.
And that's a big thing too with the Kickstarter process, is that like you pay your thing, but it's always understood that the shipping will come once it's time to fulfill it. Mm-hmm. And so for people who do that specifically, when their game comes through, it may be very dependent on where the tariff sits, on whether they're paying what is a more traditional $10 shipping or a higher 30, 40, whatever the increase is.
Certainly what we've seen over the last couple of months is the case. It's changed fairly drastically.
Yeah. And for us, like, we're in a good state. Like, paying a little bit extra for the board game is not going to bankrupt us or anything like that.
They're spaced out enough for what we're getting that it's not a bunch of stuff all at once.
But this could have a major impact on the levels of income. People have different socioeconomic statuses that can enjoy board games, and especially this type of funding stream to get them.
So, kind of discussing that, nobody's really sure where things are going to shake out. Right now, it's a little hard to say. We're still kind of early in this disruption, although we are, at this point, kind of sitting in it, especially when you're doing Kickstarter stuff, you see the process as it's going. One of the articles we linked, he kind of does the back of a napkin kind of arithmetic of, well, what if it's even if it's just a 10% extra tariff on what I'm importing on a $50 game, and goes on to show essentially that by the time you hit the retailer, they may have to not increase it by 10%, they may have to increase it by almost 50%. They may take a $50 game and put it at the 70, in part because they're the ones that kind of get stuck with the bill. They have to end up buying the game at whatever their producers do. They essentially, depending on the store, will double it because if the game doesn't sell, they're just out that money. And it might not sell for a while, and if the increase of price on that increases it enough, then they'll have to increase it even more because they're buying less stock. And he kind of goes through some interesting math on how this could affect your local game store. And some of these smaller game stores may not be able to weather this issue. And for that matter, looking through opinion pieces and stuff, some of these game companies may not be able to weather it. One of the articles we linked talks with a company that produces Fighter Tower, which is they're an independent company, and they spend $100,000 on a shipment of games. They said multiple times a year, which, because of the way companies work, they can pay, but just barely. Essentially, they're not rolling in the money as we might hope. But they said if it ships and all of a sudden the tariffs shoot up 145%, and they're paying all of a sudden now, instead of $100,000, $245,000, they go bankrupt overnight. They don't have the money to pay for that container. So they said they have to be careful about whether they're shipping stuff. We've seen other companies kind of loosely discuss there's a good chance that they're not going to be making new games. They'll probably be doing either updates to their old games or rerun prints, essentially, of their popular games, just to kind of weather their way through this until this ends. there's a good chance we'll see the potential for good games that will no longer be there, essentially, and we'll see maybe some of these companies that we really like go away.
Yeah. And that's really sad because we've been in this renaissance period of board games. Probably last 15 years?
Yeah, you can kind of pick and choose a few different major milestones in the gaming community of increase. But certainly over the last 20 years, maybe even, but certainly over the last 10, we've seen specifically board games with kind of the start of Catan really becoming much more mainstream and a much bigger business.
Yeah. And like this has really like been led by indie board game companies. The old cap games of Uno and all that stuff are still there. They're going to still be there, but like because of these niche interest groups who love board games and love complex board games, and the companies who have built games to fit that desire, like you've had this boom in the board game industry.
Yeah.
And it's become, I would say, fairly mainstream. I mean, I look at my best friend, a decade and a half ago, she would not play half the games she does now.
Sure, yeah.
And, you know, she really enjoys them. And so it sucks that these tariffs are going to potentially run out the people who have driven this boom in the industry.
We can hope that it's not.
No, for sure.
It's hard to say, but
yeah.
it is a shame that potential is definitely there.
Yeah.
We could see the end of some of these companies that we've really come to enjoy their games. We have kickstarted our third Flamecraft.
We have
board game from
that company. We have Flamecraft.
From that company.
We didn't kickstart the OG. But
no, that's true. We did not.
We paid too much money.
Critter Kitchen,
and now they have
Flamecraft
a dual.
Is what it's called. Worst case scenario, you could see a contraction of this industry, and maybe not the popularity of games, but like the ability to buy them can go way down. If games increase by $20, if I was buying $4 or $50 games a year, I'm maybe only buying 2, maybe 3. It could really hurt.
We were looking at some stats before this, and most households have between 1 and 25 games, and they bring in between 1 and 4 new games a year. We're in the top 10% of over 100 board games. But for families, as a lot of people's love for board games start with like a family game night and whatnot, the big increase from 45 to 75 could really limit their ability to grow their game libraries.
Yeah, you could see people who would have gotten into it or might have gotten into it not getting into it. And like I said, you know, for a lot of people, your first games are done with your family.
Yep.
If your family's can't afford or is not going to afford some of these games, you might not get into it.
And what a dark world if your first complex board game is Monopoly.
Well, some of us roll.
We mentioned a few articles that are going to be linked below, but if you're curious to see how other board game companies are responding to the tariffs and whatnot, there is a
Reddit link, I think.
There's a Reddit link that they're compiling everybody's responses from different Kickstarters and whatnot about how they're being impacted by tariffs. So if you want to learn more about that, we definitely encourage you to do so. We're just two board game enthusiasts. We're not economists. We're not even board game developers.
Nobody's done a specific study. It looks like there's just some kind of loose articles with people's opinions mostly right now. But we have had experience that has directly impacted us.
Yeah, absolutely. If that's the case, like if you or your family are kind of hitting this point of like, we can't afford it, even before tariffs, if that was an issue, like there are ways that you can get exposed to board games that aren't just buying them.
Essentially off topic, but a lot of your local, especially bigger gaming stores will have a room to play and very often free games to play with.
Yep.
Maybe you have to ask permission or whatever, but that's a good way to do it. Some libraries now carry
a lot of libraries.
Some of these games, and we in fact were talking some of the games we're planning on getting rid of. We'll probably see if we can donate to our local library. And both of those are just great ways to get into it.
And then depending on your area, mostly urban areas, because there's always a detriment or a lack of rural resources, but we'll have nonprofits that focus on board games and exposing them to the youth, even Dungeons and Dragons. I'll try to flash some up that happen to exist. We're really glad that you guys have watched this video. We love board games, and we're definitely curious how the community is going to grow, whether or not Tariffs existed, this level of Tariffs existed. But if you want to hear our opinions on the future of board game communities, you want to watch us play board games, if you want to hear our reviews or see us unbox Kickstarters, this is the place to be.
Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Hit the notification bell. We'll let you know when our next video is up. There's some pop-up Place Hitman coming up, so enjoy my frustrations with that. Comment down below if you have kickstarted and are already been affected by the tariffs like us, or tried to buy a game and do that, or if you just have an opinion, that's great too. Any type of engagement is great.
If there's nothing else, we'll see you next time. Good
Cool.
job. Alright. Make some food. You have so much charging to do, Scott.
Yeah, well, I didn't prioritize. I prioritized yard work stuff.